welcome to another episode of the Bright Light Show. How are you all doing? I hope that you've enjoyed your first week back at school, that you've settled into the groove and that you're safe and that you're well. Well, this week we're going to continue with our series on the people that Jesus met. Now, last week Jesus met Thomas, and if you remember, Thomas had a lot of doubts, a lot of questions. Jesus had been killed, he'd been crucified, and then some of his disciples had started to see him and experience him, and Thomas wasn't having any of it. Well, this week, Jesus meets someone else. In fact, he meets someone else again. And if I was this person, I'd have been feeling a bit nervous about meeting Jesus, a bit worried. Let's find out what happens.
This is Peter.
Hey-o! Whoop!
Peter was a fisherman who was called by Jesus.
Hey!
Peter saw the many miracles of Jesus, and he heard all of his teachings. When the time came for Jesus to die and take away the sins of all the world, Jesus had one final meal with his friends. During this meal, Jesus told his followers that the time had come for him to leave them.
Huh?
Peter asked, "Where are you going?" Jesus told him Peter couldn't follow him now,
What?
but that he would follow him later.
Wait a second.
But Peter said, "Why can't I come now? I'm ready to die for you." Jesus said, "Die for me? Peter, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even knew me." Then Jesus and his disciples went to the Mount of Olives so Jesus could pray. Along the way, Jesus told his followers that they would all abandon him.
Uh-oh.
But Peter said, "Even if everyone else leaves you, I never will." Jesus said, "Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." But Peter wouldn't believe it and vowed that he would stay with Jesus until the very end. The other disciples vowed the same.
Yeah, I hear.
Later on that night, Jesus was arrested by men sent by the religious teachers and priests. Peter tried to fight for Jesus, and he cut off the ear of one of the guards.
Ow!
But Jesus healed the guard
Huh?
and went quietly with the captors. All the disciples scattered just as Jesus told them they would. The men led Jesus away to the house of the high priest. Peter and another disciple followed them. Peter came to warm himself by their fire.
Hello.
A servant girl noticed him in the firelight.
Huh?
Finally, she said, "This man was one of Jesus' followers."
Oh, ma?
But Peter denied it for the first time. He said, "I don't even know him." After a while, someone else looked at him and said, "You must be one of them."
Oh.
Peter, for a second time, said, "No, I'm not."
Okay.
About an hour later, a man who knew the man whose ear Peter cut off said, "Didn't I see you in the olive grove with Jesus? This must be one of them. He comes from the same place as all of them."
Yeah, you're right.
But Peter said,
No.
"I don't know what you're talking about." And then Peter heard the crow of the rooster. Jesus turned and looked at Peter. Jesus' words flashed through his mind, and Peter left the courtyard weeping. Then Jesus died and was placed in a tomb. The disciples heard that he had come back from the dead. Peter even saw the empty tomb and believed that Jesus was alive again.
Woohoo!
And Jesus appeared to the disciples to show him that he was alive. Some of Jesus' followers were together when Peter said, "I am going fishing."
Okay.
So they all went out to the sea, but caught nothing all night. At dawn, they saw a man standing on the beach.
Oh, hey, over here.
The man called out to them and said, "Have you caught any fish?"
Nope.
The man said, "Throw out your net on the right side and you'll get some."
Okay.
So they did, and they couldn't bring in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then one of the men on the boat said to Peter, "It's Jesus." When Peter heard that it was Jesus, he swam to the shore while the others pulled in the load to the boat. When they got there, they found breakfast waiting for them.
Bring me some fish. Got it.
Jesus said, "Come have some breakfast." While they were eating, Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" Peter said, "Yes, you know I love you." So Jesus said, "Then feed my lambs." Then Jesus asked again, "Do you love me?" Peter said again, "Yes, you know I love you." And Jesus said, "Then take care of my sheep." And then a third time, Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a third time, so he said, "You know everything. You know that I love you." So Jesus said one last time, "Then feed my sheep." And so Peter went on to feed Jesus' sheep by helping establish the church and by writing books that we can now read in the Bible. And though he denied Jesus, he was forgiven, and many came to know the love and forgiveness of Jesus
John.
through
Now,
Peter.
Before we think about why John included this story, let me ask you a question. What are the things that have changed your life? What are the things that have happened to you? Maybe conversations, maybe places you've visited, maybe people that you've met. What are the things that have happened to you that have changed your life? Because for Peter, 6 questions, I think, changed Peter's life. The first questions that changed Peter's life were when Peter followed Jesus after he'd been arrested, just like we saw in that story. All the rest of the disciples, they fled, they ran away when the soldiers came and they took Jesus away, but Peter didn't. Peter followed Jesus, and he was asked 3 questions as he was standing around that fire, wasn't he? The questions were, don't you know Jesus? Don't you know that man? Aren't you one of the disciples? Weren't you with him? And then Peter had a choice to make. And Peter could have gone, yeah, I was one of Jesus' disciples. In fact, I'm one of the really important ones. I'm like Jesus' best mate. Jesus even's got a nickname for me. He calls me the Rock. I'm like the lead disciple. You better arrest me as well. But Pete didn't say that. Or he could have said, yeah, I'm one of them. I agree with what Jesus has been saying. But he didn't say that. Pete said, no, I'm not one of the disciples. I'm not with them. I don't even know Jesus. Pete, up to that point, had been with Jesus every day. When Jesus was performing miracles, Pete was there. When Jesus was healing people, Pete was there. When Jesus was telling people and showing people what God's kingdom is all about and what God is like, Pete was there. And now Pete goes, I don't even know him. Imagine how you would feel if one of your best friends pretended they didn't even know who you were. Imagine how Pete felt when he saw Jesus look at him, and then when he saw what happened to Jesus, Jesus was taken off and crucified. Have you ever felt really guilty about something? Have you ever said something to someone, and then as soon as you said it, you thought to yourself, I wish I didn't say that. And you have that horrible feeling where you feel horrible and a bit dirty, and maybe you can't stop thinking about what you said, or about how that person looked back at you when you said it, or when you did whatever you did. All of us have made mistakes. All of us has hurt people. I know that I have. There's times in my life where I've said something or I've done something, and as soon as I have, I've thought, I wish I could take that back. I wish I'd never said that. And you just feel guilty. Well, I think Pete, he must have been feeling like that. After denying Jesus, after making out like he didn't even know who Jesus was, he must have felt pretty low. And then for Pete, it was even worse, because he couldn't go up to Jesus and apologise because Jesus had been killed. Jesus wasn't there anymore. So Pete had to find some way of dealing with this guilt and this horrible feeling. But then imagine how Pete must have felt when he found out from the disciples that, well, Jesus is back. People are starting to see Jesus. I mean, if I was Pete, I think I'd be nervous. What's Jesus going to say when he sees me? Is he going to be angry with me? Is he going to tell me off? Is he going to say, Pete, I'm really disappointed in you. You let me down. I'd be worried. I'd be excited. I'd be happy that my friend is alive or back. But I'd be worried. I'd be scared. And then come 3 questions that change Pete's life again, that turn everything upside down again. Pete sees Jesus as he's in the fishing boat, and he swims to the shore, and they have some food, and Jesus says, do you love me? Doesn't he? Do you love me? And he asks 3 times, do you love me? And Pete's like, yeah, I love you. I love you. Yeah, I love you. And the Bible even says that Pete's a little bit upset that Jesus keeps asking that. And then, at the same time, Jesus says to Pete, well, go and feed my sheep. Now, I don't think Jesus was asking Pete to become a shepherd or a farmer. I think it's like Jesus is saying to Pete, before, and I told you that you were going to be a key person in showing people what it means to live my way, in helping people to understand what it means to live the Jesus way. And I think now Jesus is saying to Pete, don't live in guilt. Get on and do that. You can do that now. And there and then, Peter experiences forgiveness. And I think as much as Peter is forgiven by Jesus, I think in that moment, perhaps, Peter forgives himself. Because sometimes the hardest thing can be to forgive yourself when you've done something wrong. So just like we see Jesus forgiving Pete, we can be reminded that Jesus forgives us, that we experience forgiveness, that God always forgives us when we make mistakes, when we get things wrong, when we hurt people with our words and with our actions. And the other challenge, I suppose, is can we forgive each other? Easy to talk about, really hard to do. Hard to forgive people when they hurt you. Maybe even harder to forgive yourself when you've hurt someone. Right, we're going to do a craft now that's going to help us to think about this story a little bit more.
Craft time.
Morning, Bright Lights. Because it's been Earth Day this week, I thought today's craft would make from everything that you might find in your recycling bin, so we can do our bit to help the environment. Now, our story today was about Jesus meeting Peter, and he forgave Peter and said, Peter, do you love me? And Peter said yes, and he said, feed my sheep. So we're going to do a sheep craft, a bit like this, and that's what we're going to end up with. So what you're going to need is you're going to need some glue, and you're going to need some cardboard and paper that you find in your recycling bin. So go and have a look. It could be a cereal box like I've got here, or it could be a cardboard box that you've had delivery from. So the first thing you're going to need to do is find a piece of card and fold it in half like this. And then you're going to need to put your hand on the paper like this. Doesn't matter if your fingers come off the end. Your fingers will probably be a bit smaller than mine, so they won't come off the end. And you're going to draw around your hand like this. And then we're going to cut that out. You might need some help if your card is thick. So ask a grown-up to help you. And be careful with the scissors. And our fingers are going to make the sheep's legs. Just cut around the last one there. There we go. So now we've got our legs. We're going to colour all of those in just up to here. I won't do all of them like that, but you carry on and do all of them. And then you need to put some glue on this bit. You need quite a bit of glue. And I'm going to use this cardboard just to spread it all around like this. And then what you're going to need to do is take some scrap paper and tear bits off and screw them up into a ball. And then you can stick all those screwed up bits of paper to make the sheep's wool. And when you've finished covering it, we're going to need a face for our sheep. So I've taken another bit of card that I cut off a cardboard box, and I've drawn the shape of the sheep's face, and I've cut it out, coloured it in and stuck some eyes on it. So then you might need to cut a little bit off and put some more glue and stick on our face. And then you may need to turn the ends of his legs up so that your sheep stands up. And to finish off, and to remind us of what the story means, I've written on the back 3 things, because if you remember, Peter denied Jesus 3 times and Jesus asked him 3 times if he loved him. So I've got 3 things to remind us of the story. Number 1 is God loves us. Number 2 is God forgives us, just like he forgave Peter for denying him. And number 3 is God uses us even when we mess up, even when we make mistakes. So Peter had made a mistake, but Jesus forgave him and said to him, go feed my sheep, go and work for me, go and tell people about me. So even when we mess up, God can use us too. See you next week. Bye.
What a cool craft. See if you can have a go at that this week. We're going to now do another quiz. A quiz with Paul.
A quiz with Paul.
Hello and welcome to another quiz with Paul. Like last week, this is true or false. 5 questions, 5 seconds. But do think about it. You've got 5 seconds. Make sure you get it right. Can you get all 5 right? The first question. The name of the prisoner who was released instead of Jesus was called Barnabas. Now that's false. It was Barabbas. Barabbas. Barnabas was the friend that looked after Paul and made friends with him when he first became a Christian. Question 2. As Jesus entered Jerusalem, the people waved palm branches. True or false? That one is true. Number 3. The Apostle Paul's original name was John. Is that true or false? Now that is false, because Paul was originally called Saul. So Saul changed to Paul. Number 4. The day when the apostles received the Holy Spirit is called Pentecost. Is that true or false? That one is true. And the last question. Judas was replaced as an apostle, a disciple. Is that true or false? Now that is true, because the 11 disciples under Peter's guidance chose a new disciple called Matthias. That's in Acts chapter 1. There we are, that's the questions for this week. I hope you managed to get them right. The last one was hard, wasn't it? Look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.
Time for a song now. And as normal, if you're not into singing, try and just think about what the words mean. Here we go.
I lay my life down at your feet. You're the only one I need. I turn to you and you are always there. In troubled times it's you I see. I put you first, that's all I need. I humble all I am, all to you. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. You're the only one, you're the only one, you're the only one that I could live for. You're the only one, you're the only one, you're the only one that I could live for. You were always, always there, every how and everywhere. Your grace abounds so deeply within me. You will never ever change. Yesterday, today, the same. Forever till forever meets no end. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. Are you having fun? Well, what we're gonna do now is we're all gonna get down nice and low. That's it, how low can you go? And we're gonna sing, you are the way, the truth and the life. Come on, let me hear ya. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight for you. We're living all for you. Up a bit higher. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight for you. We're living all for you. You are the way. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight for you. We're living all for you. You are the way, the truth and the life. We live by faith and not by sight for you. We're living all for you. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for. One way, Jesus, you're the only one that I could live for.
Takeaway. Number 1. When Jesus forgives Pete, he also asks him to continue showing and telling people about God's kingdom. Number 2. Peter said he didn't know Jesus 3 times. Jesus asked Pete whether he still loved him 3 times. Number 3. Pete went on to be an important leader in the early church, before it was even called church. You can read more about what Pete got up to in Acts. And there it is. There's our takeaway for this week. So there we go. That was the story of Jesus meeting Peter again, and of those 6 questions that turn Peter's world upside down. This week, let's see if we can forgive each other when we say things and hurt things that are hurtful. Let's remember that God forgives us. And let's also forgive ourselves when we've said stuff and done stuff that is hurtful. I hope you have a really lovely week. I hope you have a safe week. And I and the rest of the Bright Lights team will look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of The Bright Light Show. Boom!